Hello friends, if you want to watch super hit movie The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor in English, then you must like this video. If you are visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Friends, in today's video, the movie we are going to talk about is called The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor. We will talk about what this movie is and where you can watch it, all the interesting facts about this movie in today's video. I'm going to tell you, I'm also going to give you all the information on which OTT platform or on which satellite channel you will get to watch this movie. Also, we will talk in detail about the technical department, music department, pre-production filming, post-production, budget, box office collection of this film. We will also talk about the story of this film, and I will also give you a small review of the story of this film. Apart from this, we will discuss about the facts of this film's storyline, starcast actors' performance in the film, and which character has played which role. That's why I request you friends to watch this video till the end. Let's start the video. The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor is a 2008 American action-adventure fantasy film directed by Cohen, written by Alfred Gough and Millar, and produced by Sommers, director of the first two films, Ducsay, Sean Daniel, and James Jacks. The film is set in China rather than Egypt and focuses on the Terracotta Army's origins. It is the third and final installment in the Mummy trilogy. It stars Brendan Fraser, Jet Li, Maria Bello, replacing Rachel Weisz, who played Evelyn in the first two films, John Hannah, Luke Ford, Anthony Wong, and Michelle Yeoh. The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor premiered in Moscow on July 24, 2008, and was released in the United States on August 1, 2008. The film was a commercial success, grossing over $405 million worldwide, though it was the lowest-grossing film in the trilogy and received generally negative reviews from critics. Universal Pictures rebooted the Mummy franchise with a 2017 reboot film in an attempt to start a cinematic universe under the name Dark Universe. Plot: in ancient China, a warlord unites the country's kingdoms into an empire, becoming the Dragon Emperor. He leads a civil war to become the founder of the Qin dynasty, with his men burning existing books and scrolls. The emperor later orders the construction of the Great Wall of China and buries his enemies' corpses beneath it. However, fearing his death would end all he had accomplished, the emperor summoned the sorceress Ziyuan and sent her to a monastery with his second-in-command, General Ming, to find the long-lost oracle bones, which holds the key to eternal life. Ziyuan and Ming fall in love, despite the emperor wanting her personally. When one of his servants witnesses them consummating their relationship, he has Ming executed in retaliation. However, Ziyuan anticipated this. Instead of giving him immortality, she cursed the emperor and his army, turning them into the Terracotta Army. In 1946, 13 years after the deaths of Imhotep and the Scorpion King, Alex O'Connell, Rick and Evelyn O'Connell's son, and his archaeology professor Roger Wilson find the emperor's tomb. Though attacked by a mysterious woman, they bring the sarcophagus to Shanghai. Meanwhile, the British government entrusts Rick and Evelyn to take a gemstone called the Eye of Shangri-La back to China. During the Chinese New Year in Shanghai, the O'Connells learn that Wilson works for a rogue military faction led by General Yang and his assistant, Colonel Choi, who provided the financial backing for Alex's expedition. Yang believes the emperor can lead China out of the chaos following World War II and the Chinese Civil War, resurrecting him using the Eye of Shangri-La, which contains mystical water from Shangri-La. The revived emperor accepts Yang's services but kills Wilson. The O'Connells try stopping him with Lynn's help, the woman who earlier attacked Alex, but he escapes. Lynn reveals that she possesses the only weapon that can kill the emperor, a cursed dagger. Along with Evelyn's brother, Jonathan Carnahan, the O'Connells and Lynn travel to a stupa in the Himalayas that will reveal the path to Shangri-La. With help from Yetis summoned by Lynn, the group holds off Yang's forces, but the emperor discovers Shangri-La's location. The emperor gravely wounds Rick, while Alex triggers an avalanche, slowing the emperor's pursuit. Lynn takes them to Shangri-La, where Ziyuan still lives and can heal Rick's wound. Lynn is actually Yuan's daughter, both rendered immortal by the mystical waters. The emperor and Yang arrive, and he bathes in the waters, restoring his human form and granting him supernatural power. Morphing into a three-headed dragon, he steals the dagger, kidnaps Lynn, and flies back to his tomb. The Emperor revives the Terracotta Army for world domination and directs them to breach the Great Wall, after which they will be invincible. The O'Connells and Ziyuan pursue the Emperor to the Great Wall, where Yuan, using the Oracle Bones, sacrifices her and Lin's immortality to raise an undead army of the Emperor's enemies, led by a revived General Ming. As the two undead armies clash, Alex rescues Lin. Yuan fights the Emperor and steals the dagger from him before he mortally wounds her. While dying, she gives the blade to Rick and Alex. The Emperor retreats into the Great Wall, where Alex and Rick confront him while Evelyn and Lin fight Yang and Choi. During the fight, Lin throws Yang into rotating gears. Choi tries to save him, but both are crushed to death. Meanwhile, Rick and Alex overpower the Emperor and stab him with the dagger, causing him to explode, which kills him and destroys the Terracotta Army. Ming and his army celebrate before entering the afterlife. The O'Connells and Lin return to Shanghai, where Alex and Lin start a relationship. Jonathan takes the Eye of Shangri-La and moves to Peru, where mummies would soon be found. Cast, main article, list of the Mummy film series characters. Brendan Fraser as Rick O'Connell, a retired adventurer, Evelyn's husband and Alex's father. Maria Bello as Evelyn Carnahan O'Connell, Rick's wife and Alex's mother, also a retired adventurer, librarian turned novelist. She is also the reincarnation of the Egyptian princess Nefertiti. She was previously portrayed by Rachel Weisz. John Hannah as Jonathan Carnahan, Evelyn's elder brother. Russell Wong as General Ming Guo, the Emperor's former second-in-command, Ziyuan's lover and Lin's father. Liam Cunningham as Mad Dog McGuire, a pilot and old friend of Rick who helps the O'Connells make their way to Tibet on their journey to Shangri-La. Luke Ford as Alexander Rupert Alex O'Connell, Rick's and Evelyn's son, now 21 years old, who develops a crush on Ziyuan's daughter, Lin. He was previously portrayed by Freddie Both. Isabella Leong as Lin, Alex's love interest, Ziyuan's daughter, and protector of the Emperor's tomb. Michelle Yeoh as Ziyuan, an immortal sorceress whom the Emperor sought in order to obtain the secret to eternal life she possesses. Anthony Wong as General Yang, a rogue Kuomintang general who becomes the Emperor's supporter. Jesse Meng as Colonel Choi, Yang's assistant. David Calder as Professor Roger Wilson, Alex's supporter in his expedition of the Emperor's tomb, but secretly a collaborator with Yang and Choi. Albert Kwan as Chu Hua, a worker at the initial dig site who is killed by an acid trap. James Bradford as Jameson, Rick and Evelyn's butler. Michael Shearer and Scott Taylor as the motion capture of the Yetis that aid the O'Connells in the Himalayas. Freda Fo Shen as the narrator. Jet Li as Qin Shi Huang, an evil warlord who desired immortality. Though he becomes immortal, he and his army were mummified alive. Once revived, he seeks to enslave the world. Production. Development. In November 2001, director Stephen Sommers, who directed the previous Mummy films, set about directing a third film. There is a demand for it, but most of the gang would only be up for it again if we could find a way to make it bigger and better. In May 2004, during the release of Van Helsing, he expressed his doubts about having the energy to make a third film, though the cast of previous films had expressed interest in returning. In December 2005, he reviewed a script written by Alfred Gough and Miles Millar about a Chinese mummy, China's first emperor, who wants to take over the world with his army of accursed warriors in 1940. The idea of the emperor and his army is based on the real-life Qin emperor Qin Shi Huang, who was buried amidst thousands of crafted and fired terracotta soldiers called the Terracotta Army. Writing an early version of Gough and Millar's script contained many callbacks to the previous films that went unused. The original prologue had Ziyuan, Zohora, going to Hamunaptra and making a terracotta copy of the Book of the Dead, featuring the puzzle box key from the first film. Instead of the oracle bones, Zohora uses the book's terracotta copy to curse the emperor and his army. The book would also have been used to resurrect the emperor instead of the elixir of life. Jonathan not only named his nightclub after Imhotep, but styled the barmaids with Ankh-Su-Namun's body paint. The Bembridge scholars that Evie frequently mentioned in the first film would have returned in a minor role. The character Sir Colin Willoughby, the head of the society, would play a role in the Dragon Emperor's resurrection in Wilson's place. In the second film, Mila says 3 men will receive their "your just rewards." The Emperor Mummy says Yang Okumura will get his reward when the Emperor conquers the larger world. During the final battle, Alex's slingshot would return to play a vital role in defeating the Emperor. Like the previous films, this early draft contained more body horror elements, including a crocodile eating Okumura's arm, and maggots, bone fragments, and fossilized guts seeping through the Emperor Mummy's wounds. After becoming immortal, the Emperor forms a new brain, eyeball, and skin grafts over his cracked body. In his mummy form, the Dragon Emperor shared a few similarities with Imhotep. They both drain people's life force to heal themselves. In doing so, the Emperor, however, also turns his victims into terracotta and shatters them. After draining one character, the Emperor Mummy inherits his victims' blue eyes, like Imhotep did in one scene of the second movie. Just as Imhotep made impressions of his face in sand and water in the first and second films, respectively, the Emperor Mummy does the same during the avalanche, making his face appear in the snow. The mummification sequence was also more graphic, as the Emperor's heart would have become visible through his chest, pumping black blood through his veins and out of his pores. Then molten clay covers his clothes and body before being superheated and hardened by intense white light beams from within him. The script showed the Emperor as having a more ruthless personality. He sends Zohora to Hamunaptra under the threat of killing her lover Ming Guo, Sun Tzu, if she fails to return within 90 days, only to present her with his head in a box when she does. When he becomes immortal, the Emperor puts a searing finger on Okumura's forehead and makes him kneel and pledge his loyalty. He kisses Zohora to simultaneously spite and curse her by turning her and the other immortals in Shangri-La into terracotta statues. The curse doesn't affect Lily Chen, because she's already sacrificed her immortality before the Emperor arrives in Shangri-La. Then, as he takes Lily, the Emperor tells her she will pay for her mother's sins by sharing his bed as his queen. During the climax, the Emperor punishes Okumura for his failure by encasing him in a giant brass lantern. The script took place in 1940 during World War II instead of afterward. Rick and Evie are introduced in Agra, India, acting as spies for the British government, observing Okumura, believing he has a secret weapon for the Japanese to win the war, later revealed to be the Emperor. With the backdrop of the war, the script shows the tensions between the Chinese and Japanese, with one scene in Imhotep's where Jonathan calms a dispute between the O'Connell's friend and Chinese resistance member, Chang, and Japanese Major Suki. Another later had the O'Connells reluctantly forced to stand back and watch Chang get captured by Japanese troops, who collect insurgents and send them on trains to work camps, as Lily previously told Alex. It's revealed that despite Rick and Evie sending Alex to Yale to protect him, he left his first year without their knowledge and failed to enlist in the army before being called by Willoughby to work with him. Unlike the film, the O'Connells learn the Emperor has 5 days to become immortal after he's awakened, or he'll turn to dust. Later, at a monastery in the Himalayas ransacked by Japanese soldiers, they encounter a Tibetan monk they dub Tequila, who joins the group, leading them to the Temple of Whispering Skulls and accompanying them to the Great Wall. Rather than the Emperor Mummy mortally wounding Rick, Alex would have taken the hit to save his dad. Other notable differences between the script and film include Shangri-La depicted as a lush utopia filled with people from various eras. The Dragon Emperor showed more of his mastery over the 5 Chinese elements. He freezes and unfreezes a river to escape, rapidly shoots fireballs from his hands, makes snow arms to drag enemies underground, and makes a rain cloud with water from the spring of eternal life to raise his army. Unlike in the movie, he doesn't become a shapeshifter. Many Chinese slave workers and other prisoners the Japanese took, including Chang, ward off the Emperor's terracotta army instead of undead warriors. Instead of the one-on-one fight between Rick and the Dragon Emperor, the O'Connells try to complete a ritual involving the 5 elements to unlock the River of Spirits, the Emperor's enemies' souls beneath the Great Wall, to defeat the terracotta soldiers as the Emperor tries to stop them. Rick tells the Emperor to give Imhotep his regards after delivering the killing blow. The terracotta curse upon Shangri-La ends with the Emperor's death, freeing its inhabitants, including Zohora. Casting. In March 2006, actor Oded Fair, who played Ardith Bey in the first two films, said that Sommers had told him that a third film was in development and being written, with only Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz's characters returning. The following September, Universal Pictures offered director Joe Johnston the helm, instead of Jurassic World, but Johnston declined. Later in the month, Weisz expressed interest in reprising her role. In January 2007, Universal announced Sommers would not direct the third film and that Rob Cohen had entered negotiations to take over directing duties. Sommers opted out because he felt the first two really came together and that third ones are just very hard. Later in the month, the story was revealed to center around Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz's characters, as well as their adult son. Negotiations with the actors were in progress at that time. In February, casting began for the role of Alex O'Connell. Additionally, John Hannah reprised his role as Jonathan. Also in that month, Cohen mentioned that Jet Li and Michelle Yeoh would star in the film, although the official confirmation wasn't published until May. In April, Brendan Fraser rejoined the cast for the film. Weisz did not, citing problems with the script, in addition to having just given birth to her son. The film was shot in Montreal and China. The film was originally reported to be titled The Mummy 3: Curse of the Dragon. In April, Luke Ford was cast as Alex O'Connell, replacing Freddie Both in the role, and in May, Maria Bello was cast to replace Weisz in the role of Evelyn. Bello commented during an interview that the new Evie is different from the original Evie. She has the same name, but she is quite a different character, said Bello. At a news conference in Shanghai, Bello told the audience that Rob Cohen has created a new Evelyn. In the first two Mummy movies, she was all actiony and lovely, but this Evelyn might be a little more forceful in terms of her martial arts skills and shooting skills. Filming. Principal photography started at Montreal's Mel's Site du Cinéma. There, the Eye of Shangri-La scenes were shot by production designer Nigel Phelps. The team then shot on the courtyard set of Gateway to Shangri-La. The courtyard was dressed with fake snow, created by effects supervisor Bruce Steinheimer's team. At the city's ADF stage, Phelps's team created sets of the terracotta mausoleum. Set decorator Anne Colgian designed 20 different statue heads that were sculpted by 3D Arts team and interchanged between shots. One soldier and horse statue was bought from China, and copies of it as well as the Dragon Emperor were made. Jet Li's statue was sculpted by Lucy Fournier, Tino Petronzio, and Nick Petronzio in a workshop in Montreal. Prop master Kim Wai-chung supervised the making of the horses' bridles and mausoleum ornaments in China. Meanwhile, at Mel's, the brutal battle between the Emperor and Rick was filmed, the first scene shot with Jet Li. On October 15, 2007, the team moved to China. At Shanghai Studios, a set depicting the city in the 1940s was used for the chase sequence and was shot in 3 weeks. General Yang's camp was filmed in a Ming village near Tianmo. At the studio, Chinese cultural advisors aided Cohen in depicting the Qin dynasty language and ceremonies. 25. The O'Connell family's drama scenes were shot in an Egyptian-themed nightclub suitably named Imhotep's. The crew frequently had to halt filming when soldiers marched in and near Shanghai. The desert battlefield setting was actually a training facility for the Chinese army that was leased. Filming also took place in the UK, including at Shepperton Studios and Waddesdon Manor. Visual effects. The visual effects were done by 2 Los Angeles-based VFX houses. Rhythm and Hughes Studios, R&H, designed the Yetis and Dragons, while Digital Domain handled the battle scenes with the Emperor's terracotta warriors. The pool of water, resembling diamonds, took Rhythm and Hughes 11 months to complete. The AI software Massive, used for the Lord of the Rings films, was used to create the undead battle scenes. Design company Imaginary Forces created the opening title sequence and end titles. IF designers also shot real paint splatters and brushstrokes. To portray an accurate and historic China, they turned to calligrapher T.Z. Yuan for ink brush writing. Music. Most of the film's score was composed by Randy Edelman and performed by the London Symphony Orchestra. The soundtrack features numerous different Chinese and Middle Eastern ethnic instruments, along with classic British folklore. The soundtrack was released on July 29, 2008, by Varese Saraband label, 2 days before the film's release. Composer John Debney, who had previously scored the music for the Mummy franchise's spin-off The Scorpion King, provided additional rescored material for most of the bigger action sequences. The Hollywood Studio Symphony recorded 30 minutes of Debney's music in less than 10 hours at the Fox scoring stage in July 2008, shortly before the film's release. However, the soundtrack album features Edelman's score and none of Debney's. The trailer prominently features the cues Armada by Two Steps from Hell and DNA Reactor by Pfeiffer Bras. Music, the latter, which also plays at the end of the Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix trailer. It also plays Vampire Hunters by Wojciech Kilar, which was used in the trailers of the first and second films. The soundtrack features the Flower Duet by Léo Delibes from his opera Lakme. Reception. Marketing. The Mummy movie prequel, The Rise and Fall of Zango's Axe, a comic book limited series by IDW Publishing, was published to promote the film. The comic explores the relationship between Rick and his son Alex. Sierra Entertainment made a game version of The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor for Wii, PlayStation 2, and Nintendo DS, which was released on July 22, 2008, in North America to mostly negative reviews. Gameloft made game version of The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, for mobile phones. Box office. The film premiered in Moscow on July 24, 2008, and had a wide release of 3,760 theaters in North America on August 1, 2008. The film was the top-grossing film the day it opened, earning $15.2 million. The Dark Knight was in second place with $12 million on Friday. However, the film did not become number one overall in the box office on opening weekend, claiming only $40.4 million, which allowed The Dark Knight to claim the top spot for the third consecutive week with $42.6 million. The film, however, scored a bigger success at the international box office, where it opened at the first position in 26 of the 28 released markets over the weekend and grossed over $59.5 million in the three-day period. It substantially outpaced comparable openings for The Mummy, $16.7 million, and The Mummy Returns, $21.5 million, in the same markets. The film also set opening records for the distributor in Korea, drawing $13.3 million, Russia, $12.7 million, Spain, $6.7 million, and Thailand. As of October 10, 2008, the film's domestic total stands at 102,491,076, with a much stronger international intake of $303,268,049. This brings its worldwide total to 405,760,225. It is the lowest grossing film in the Mummy trilogy. Critical response. As of June 2022, on Rotten Tomatoes, the film has an approval rating of 13% based on 176 reviews, with an average rating of 3.710. The site's critical consensus read, "With middling CG effects and a distinct lack of fun, The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor finds the series past its prime." As of November 2021 on Metacritic, the film has a weighted average score of 31 out of 100, based on reviews from 33 critics, indicating generally unfavorable reviews. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of B- on an A+ to F scale. Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times gave the film a positive review, awarding it 3 stars out of 4, and remarking, "Now why did I like this movie? It was just plain dumb fun, is why." Ebert also stated that it is the best in the series. Nathan Rabin of the Onion's AV Club stated that the film succeeds largely through sheer excess, albeit within a context that plods along mechanically through its first hour. William Arnold of Seattle Post-Intelligencer gave a mildly positive review, saying that anyone in the market for an overblown and totally mindless adventure comedy will certainly get his money's worth. Dallas movie reviewer Casey C. Corpier said that the film was almost as enjoyable as the original and liked the fact that it delivered what it advertised. Kenneth Turan of the Los Angeles Times said the film has some good things, but does not have enough of them to make the third time the charm. Ken Fox of TV Guide called the film passable popcorn fare. Jenny Punter of the Globe and Mail said the film is kind of fun, but the twists and turns are all too familiar. Michael Schrago of the Baltimore Sun said the film is like an Indiana Jones movie without rhythm, wit, or personality, just a desperate, headlong pace. Home media. The film was released on DVD and Blu-ray on December 16, 2008. By mid-2011, excluding Blu-ray sales and DVD rentals, it had sold over 2.5 million copies, totaling $41,768,192 in revenue. Future canceled sequel. After the film was released, actress Maria Bello stated that another Mummy film will absolutely be made and that she had already signed on. Actor Luke Ford was signed on for 3 more films as well. However, in 2012, Universal Pictures canceled the film and was instead working on a reboot titled The Mummy. On October 12, 2022, Brendan Fraser revealed that he's open to revisit the franchise and said, "I don't know how it would work, but I'd be open to it if someone came up with the right concept." Later, Fraser told Pete Hammond that although he does not know any details about a reboot, he was not against returning. On May 11, 2024, Stephen Sommers told The Hollywood Reporter that a new installment would have to be something really special. "Of course, I would work with all of those actors again." Reboot. See also The Mummy 2017 film. On April 4, 2012, Universal announced their plans to reboot the franchise. The film was intended to be the first installment of the Dark Universe, simply titled The Mummy, and was released in June 2017. However, the film failed both critically and financially, making this the only film installment in a failed Dark Universe. The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, has the O'Connell family, including Father Rick, Mother Evelyn, and son Alex, joining forces with an immortal Chinese woman and her beautiful daughter. An evil general named Yang has awakened the Han Emperor so they can conquer the world with the Emperor's magical knowledge. The heroes must stop the Emperor from drinking from the waters of the Pool of Shangri-La high in the Himalayas and gaining immortality and more power. Even then, they can kill the Emperor with a cursed dagger through the heart, but getting past his resurrected army of mud soldiers is a major obstacle. Tomb of the Dragon Emperor has fun, exciting action sequences. The special effects are pretty good. The dialogue is a little corny at times, however, and the characters need more development. Regrettably, the movie's worldview is too mixed. It features some redemptive, morally uplifting content, but there is some foul language, pagan mythology, and magic, including magical curses and other mystical content. Thus, Movie Guide advises strong caution for family audiences. Despite the Mummy references, the movie is more of an action fantasy, not a horror movie. Content: Papa, OCBBLLVVSNAM. Mystical, slightly mixed pagan worldview with pagan magic about curses, magical power, and resurrecting the dead, including a woman is called a witch, with some redemptive and sacrificial allegorical elements reflecting biblical truth, including slaying a villain who can transform himself into an evil dragon and other beasts. Plus, family unites to combine forces with immortal female guardians in order to destroy villain and his evil army, and including references to gaining immortality via a magical pool of water in the fabled Shangri-La. Character makes sacrifice to stop villain, and father steps in the way of a bullet aimed for his son. 14 obscenities and 2 light profanities. Lots of action violence and some scary violence involving creatures such as evil dragon and friendly abominable snowmen, or Yeti, but nothing extremely bloody or gory. Includes extensive chase scene between carriage and motor vehicle, fighting, martial arts, sword fighting, gun battles, army fires arrows, people on fire, explosions, people dragged, leaping and falling, woman raises army of the dead from skeletons, but they are good guys, masses of Chinese terracotta soldiers brought to life, quick shot of human decapitation, terracotta soldiers disintegrated in various ways, etc., implied fornication and passionate kissing in bedroom scenes set in ancient China, upper male nudity, alcohol use, no smoking, and betrayal. More detail. The third Mummy movie in Universal's revised action-adventure series, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, is a bit more family-friendly than the first 2. There are still some elements, however, that require caution. The movie opens in ancient China, where a woman, Michelle Yeoh, Ziyuan, uses a magical curse to stop the evil Han Emperor, Jet Li, from acquiring the key to immortality. After the Emperor murders her beloved, she turns him and his army to dried mud. Cut to 1946, where explorer Rick O'Connell, Brendan Fraser, and his wife Evelyn, Maria Bello, are bored with their retirement in England. They don't know it, but their son, Alex, Luke Ford, has skipped out of college to find the tomb of the Han Emperor. At that moment, Rick and Evelyn accept a mission from the government to return a large jewel known as the Eye of Shangri-La to China. Little do they know that an evil general named Yang wants to use the jewel to awaken the Han Emperor so they can conquer the world with the Emperor's magical knowledge. Rick, Evelyn, and Alex join forces with Ziyuan's immortal daughter, Lin, Isabella Leong. They must stop the Emperor from drinking from the waters of the Pool of Shangri-La high in the Himalayas and gaining immortality and more power. Even then, they can kill the Emperor with a cursed dagger created by Lin's mother, but getting past his resurrected army of mud soldiers presents a major obstacle. Tomb of the Dragon Emperor has fun, exciting action sequences. The special effects are pretty good. The dialogue is a little corny at times, however, and the characters could use more development. Regrettably, the movie's worldview is too mixed. It features some redemptive, morally uplifting content, but there is some foul language, pagan mythology, and magic, including magical curses and other mystical content. Thus, Movie Guide advises strong caution for family audiences. Despite the mummy references, the movie is an action fantasy, not a horror movie. The 95th Academy Awards ceremony is coming up in a week, which still leaves curious film fans a little time to catch up on the nominees. Most of them are available to stream by now. But as usual, the contenders are mostly a bunch of serious stories. If you need a break from watching graphically gruesome trench warfare in Netflix's All Quiet on the Western Front, Brendan Gleeson performatively mutilating himself in The Banshees of Inisherin, or rich people projectile vomiting en masse in Triangle of Sadness, here's a palate cleanser for you. Brendan Fraser is heavily favored to win the Best Actor Oscar this year for his mournful role in The Whale, while Michelle Yeoh is the odds-on favorite for Best Actress for Everything Everywhere All at Once. So why not take a couple of hours to watch the only film they ever made together? 2008's The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor is readily available on streaming services. Granted, you won't get to see Yeoh tenderly caressing Jamie Lee Curtis's face while wearing floppy, disturbing hot dog finger gloves, or Fraser symbolically taking on other people's sins in another Darren Aronofsky biblical metaphor. Dragon Emperor is the kind of movie that didn't even merit the Oscars' attention back in 2008, before the Best Picture category was expanded to gin up public interest in the awards by making room at the top of the nominee list for mega hits like James Cameron's Avatar. It was tragically snubbed, understandably overlooked by the Academy, but it's still a pretty fun time today. And it's even more enjoyable in the light of the interactions Yeoh and Fraser have had together on the awards circuit. Fraser tearfully hugging Yeoh at the Critics' Choice Awards, Yeoh hauling Fraser into the Everything Everywhere group photo at the SAG Awards, the two of them gushing over each other's projects on the A24 podcast after both ceremonies. Yeoh says she wants to give director Darren Aronofsky a big hug for bringing Fraser back to acting. The third movie in the popular Mummy franchise didn't do as well at the box office as the previous two, but it was still a respectable $400 million hit, and it plays as lighter and much more meta than The Mummy and The Mummy Returns. Fraser is back as floppy-haired international adventurer Rick O'Connell, though Maria Bello steps in to replace Rachel Weisz as his wife Evelyn. Their adult son Alex, Luke Ford, kicks off the undead action this time by digging up an ancient Chinese emperor, Jet Li, cursed by immortal sorceress Ziyuan. When a handful of devoted cultists resurrect the emperor, Ziyuan and her equally immortal daughter Lin, Isabella Leong, join forces with the O'Connells to stop him. The one really regrettable part of Dragon Emperor is that Yeoh and Fraser barely share any screen time. As a martial artist and magic wielder, Ziyuan spends most of the movie on mystical projects, while Rick spends his time racing around with guns, swords, and improvised weapons, fighting cultists and trying to keep them from accomplishing various tasks on their way to reviving the Emperor, breaking Ziyuan's curse on him, and reviving his immense CGI army of terracotta soldiers. On their recent A24 podcast appearance, Fraser and Yeoh really don't have any joint memories of the film to share, apart from both talking about how exciting it was to work with Jet Li and what a sweetheart he is in real life. But for fans of mildly goofy action thrillers in the vein of the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and, most obviously, the first two Mummy movies. Tomb of the Dragon Emperor is an underrated good time. It's fast-paced and amiable, full of family banter and big, high-energy chases and fights, courtesy of the Fast and the Furious and XXX director Rob Cohen. Fraser is fully on board in his charming, boyish action star mode. It's never really plausible that Alex is Rick's son. Fraser is only about 13 years older than Luke Ford and looks a lot younger when he's grinning his way through yet another Errol Flynn-style stunt. Yeoh gets to show off her acting skills as well as her martial arts skills in this movie, with her side plot revolving around her close, supportive relationship with Lin and with Lin's father in the opening flashback sequence. It's only a small echo of what Yeoh gets to do as a character in Everything Everywhere All at Once or Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, but it's still more dimension than she gets in a lot of her fighting movies. But maybe the most charming and distinctive thing about Dragon Emperor is in the relationship between Rick and Evelyn, who have clearly reached the point of being bored and openly sexually frustrated between world-hopping and mummy-fighting adventures, and who wind up seeing this latest jaunt as more of a get-your-groove-back couple's outing than a save-the-world crisis. The first Mummy movie leaned into the horror of dealing with an undead creature and its supernatural minions. By this point in the series, the franchise was just about charismatic people hanging out and getting some noisy, weapons-focused exercise together. It's a cheerful, upbeat time waster, for Fraser and Yeoh as much as for the rest of us. Mummies are usually Egyptian corpses brought back to life. In The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, I was excited when I saw the trailer for the first time. The movie was set in China. This time, the mummies are terracotta warriors made of rocks. The main villain is Jet Li, so I expected a lot of action-packed martial arts sequences. Given all the build-up, did the movie live up to its trailer? Let's find out. Plot: the Dragon Emperor Han, Jet Li, is a heartless warrior. He wants to be immortal, so he sent his right-hand man General Ming Guo to find Zi Yuan, Russell Wong, and Michelle Yeoh, a witch who knows the secret to immortality. Emperor Han, General Ming, and witch Zi Yuan are involved in a love triangle war. Zi Yuan cast a curse on the Dragon Emperor and his army. They are trapped inside terracotta shells. In China, 1946, Alex O'Connell, Luke Ford, discovers the Dragon Emperor's tomb with the help of archaeology professor Roger Wilson, David Calder. Meanwhile, a Chinese gem called Eye of the Shangri-La is assigned to the parents of Alex, Brendan Fraser and Maria Bello, so they can bring it back to the Chinese people. When the O'Connells got together in China, they found out Professor Wilson is a traitor who works with a paramilitary group that wants to put the Emperor back to life using the Shangri-La. The Dragon Emperor came back to life. He wants to conquer the world, and he has power to control all the 5 elements: earth, air, fire, water, and wood. Review: all Brendan Fraser's Mummy movies had mixed critical reviews. This movie is no different. Let's look at the details. The story is unique and interesting. It had a lot of potential to be a classic action-adventure film. The first act, especially the flashback scenes set in China, made you feel this will be a great movie. The trap scenes inside the Emperor's tomb with the mysterious ninja made you feel like watching an Indiana Jones movie set in China. You get really hyped up. The Emperor comes back to life as a statue, constantly chipping off, revealing a burned skin inside. What follows is an awesome car chase in 1940s China. You can almost feel things will just get better. After the first hour, things just went downhill, with dozens of corny jokes and cartoonish action scenes. I don't think it happened on purpose. The movie started Indiana Jones exciting, then the second hour has the storyline of a cartoon episode. The Dragon Emperor. The Dragon Emperor, a lot of wasted potential. Emperor Han can control all the 5 elements and had the power to transform into any monster he desires. I repeat, any monster. Yet there was probably only one scene where the Emperor used fire and a few scenes where he used ice. The Emperor never clearly showed his wood and wind powers. They could have added an earthquake or a heavy storm-like scene showcasing the destructive powers of the Dragon Emperor. Instead, they seem to be more focused on the corny jokes. I don't necessarily mind that, as long as the movie is good. Comedic antics. The movie is not particularly funny. However, the subplot is cute. When Alex's parents meet their son's crush Lynn, Isabella Leong, they just couldn't trust her. Rick and Evelyn said they doubt that her magic dagger can destroy the Emperor. However, they were just smoke and mirrors, in denial to the obvious attraction between Alex and Lynn. I just thought subplots like these are interesting. It adds entertainment value to the movie and keeps the viewers interested. It also makes movie characters relatable. It shows their human side. Verdict: at the end of the day, this movie is not great, but it's entertaining and a lot of people will like it. I honestly liked it. Action and adventure fans should go see it. It would not blow your mind. However, there will be scenes that you will definitely enjoy. It's like watching a lazy Spielberg movie, the kind of movie you want to watch with your family on a Saturday afternoon. It's got to be difficult, being the child of celebrity parents, especially if you want to go into the same field, because then you're competing directly with them, and they've got tons more experience than you. The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, sees Alex O'Connell, son of legendary mummy fighters Rick and Evelyn O'Connell, trying to prove himself as an archaeologist by uncovering the tomb of the Han Emperor. Naturally, it's nowhere near as easy as that. Despite Rick and Evelyn's self-imposed boring retirement, they're lured out to Shanghai by one last final mission, to return the Eye of Shangri-La to China as a gesture of goodwill from the British government, which doesn't actually sound like a mission you'd necessarily need anyone other than a government official for, but never mind. Gathering the entire O'Connell family together in the presence of a mummy was never a good idea, and sure enough, before long, the Emperor has been returned to life and is busy gathering his terracotta army to take over the world. Because otherwise, the O'Connells would be utterly out of their depth, the movie throws in a couple more good guys. A 2,000-year-old sorceress, Zi-Wan, who cursed the Emperor and turned him to terracotta in the first place, and her immortal daughter Lynn. The two of them guard the tomb, as well as the entrance to Shangri-La and the waters of eternal life. And also, handily, the one weapon capable of killing the Emperor, a cursed dagger. And because epic battle scenes are de rigueur these days, Zi-Wan raises an undead army of her own to battle the terracotta warriors. Supposedly, the Great Wall is built with the bodies of those killed by the Emperor in its foundations, a perfect resource of undead soldiers, all bearing a grudge against the Emperor. What's great about The Mummy 3 is that it doesn't spend a huge amount of time setting things up. Instead, the audience is expected to accept that there's magic everywhere and that undead mummies can return to life to wreak havoc at any moment. After all, they've already shown us that for 2 movies. While it doesn't escape all of the cliches of the genre, the fact that we're dealing with all sorts of magical artifacts and ancient people with mystical powers means anything can happen at any time. Just when you think you've got the film more or less figured out, a bunch of surprisingly cuddly-looking Yetis show up. It's unashamedly goofy, but the silliness is part of its charm. Yes, pretty much everything that happens is at least mildly ridiculous, but it's just too much fun to mar it by worrying about little things like facts. Although, since when are there more than 4 elements? Earth, air, fire, water, right? That's why the movie The Fifth Element had such an interesting title. Throwing in other random substances, including wood and I'm sure at one point metal, just kind of screws things up a bit. I agree with Ron's assessment that there's nowhere near enough screen time devoted to Jet Li and Michelle Yeoh. According to the Mammoth production notes, Jet Li wasn't available for the epic 5-month shooting schedule, which is why the Emperor spends much of the film being a creation of CGI clay and magma, so that might explain why. Still, it's a shame. Usually, films set up to pass the mantle from a grizzled old adventurer to a new young wannabe make the newbie painfully irritating, but Luke Ford does a good enough job of being non-annoying that I won't complain too much. The Mummy franchise, while obviously not unsuccessful, isn't iconic enough for anyone to mind some changes too much, I don't think. And if no one's particularly bothered by the swap of Rachel Weisz for Maria Bello, I don't foresee much of a problem switching from Rick O'Connell to Alex O'Connell for the next sequel. I can't help but feel I should be criticizing this film more. It's obviously not high art of any kind, but it was genuinely good fun. There's no point thinking too much about any of the plot elements, since everything is handled with a quick, it's magic hand wave. The CGI isn't dazzling, but it's certainly good enough to induce viewers to suspend their disbelief. The location settings are gorgeous, the costumes are fantastic, particularly everything Michelle Yeoh puts on. The acting is, good to middling, but the script doesn't exactly require much in the way of emotional gymnastics. The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, is a lighthearted, comical adventure movie, the perfect pick-me-up if The Dark Knight left you feeling overwhelmed and depressed. The blockbuster global Mummy franchise takes a spellbinding turn as the action shifts to Asia for the next chapter in the adventure series, The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor. Brendan Fraser returns as explorer Rick O'Connell to combat the resurrected Han Emperor, Jet Li, in an epic that races from the catacombs of ancient China high into the frigid Himalayas. Rick is joined in this all-new adventure by son Alex, newcomer Luke Ford, wife Evelyn, Maria Bello, and her brother Jonathan, John Hannah. And this time, the O'Connells must stop a mummy awoken from a 2,000-year-old curse who threatens to plunge the world into his merciless, unending service, doomed by a double-crossing sorceress, Michelle Yeoh, to spend eternity in suspended animation. China's ruthless dragon emperor and his 10,000 warriors have lain forgotten for eons, entombed in clay as a vast, silent terracotta army. But when dashing adventurer Alex O'Connell is tricked into awakening the ruler from eternal slumber, the reckless young archaeologist must seek the help of the only people who know more than he does about taking down the undead, his parents. As the monarch roars back to life, our hero finds his quest for world domination has only intensified over the millennia. Striding the Far East with unimaginable supernatural powers, the Emperor Mummy will rouse his legion as an unstoppable, otherworldly force, unless the O'Connells can stop him first. Now, in The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, the trademark thrills and visually spectacular action of the Mummy series will be redefined for a new generation. I'm a big fan of 1999's The Mummy and of 2001's The Mummy Returns. This needs saying, because it's vital to understanding how deep my disappointment is with The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, the third, and now I hope, final installment in the franchise. I wasn't expecting a lot from this one. Not with the departure of creator, writer, and director Stephen Sommers, and not with the departure of Rachel Weisz, though this was of slightly less concern. And I was expecting to have to justify and rationalize how entertainingly goofy I'd find it. I anticipated being overly generous in my estimation of it, and not caring. But even with bar set low and my unconditional love set high, I cannot freaking believe how cruelly Tomb rips out my geeky little heart and stomps on it. All the magic, all the life, has been surgically excised from this charmless exercise in overblown action that is utterly clueless about how overblown actiony it is. With the 1999 film, Sommers gave us a wonderfully cheeky, smart, and snarky send-up of action comedies that was also itself a wildly fun example of the genre. But you can't even point to Tomb as the kind of thing that Sommers was toying with, because this new flick utterly fails to realize that it's riddled with cliches, and hence also fails to understand that cliches do actually serve storytelling purposes. If you're going to steal, do something with your ill-gotten gains. Don't just stand there gawking at your stolen treasure. And so as Tomb opens, setting the stage in ancient China with an evil emperor, Jet Li, who desires immortality so that he can conquer the whole world, we have Michelle Yeoh's witch informing us in voiceover that we're about to see a mythic battle between good and evil. In those words are hints that those involved, director Rob Cohen, screenwriters Alfred Gough and Miles Millar, failed to appreciate that unless this kind of thing is offered with a soupçon of snappy irony, all it does is make us roll our eyes. The Mummy winked at this kind of thing. Tomb doesn't even know it's something to be winked at. That attitude should have been stolen from the earlier films, but it was left on the vault floor in favor of ripping off simple plot points, which only emphasizes the lack of imagination at play here. The Emperor gets pissed off because his general, Russell Wong, dares to steal the witch from him, after the Emperor had decreed that no man but him could touch her. Just like all the stuff with Imhotep and the Pharaoh's concubine, that got the plot rolling in 1999. The witch curses the emperor, and he and his army turn into those famous terracotta statues you've seen pictures of and are buried for all eternity, or at least until the O'Connells can dig him up. I would have thought that Gough and Millar, who wrote Spider-Man 2 and Shanghai Noon, the latter of which shares a certain tone with the 1999 Mummy, would have been the perfect team to write a mummy movie, but no. All they've done is lift parts of the story wholesale from the previous films and from the Indiana Jones saga, with one puzzle piece early in the movie here that they found in the Well of the Souls, and one plot twist late in the movie that is a downright embarrassingly direct theft from The Last Crusade. Perhaps the director realized how unentertainingly stupid the Tomb script was and chose to bury it under video game CGI, replacing the beautiful painterly CGI of the earlier films. He doesn't quite succeed in that attempt, but that's probably his smallest crime here. Holding up the franchise is Brendan Fraser as adventurer extraordinaire and world-renowned mummy vanquisher Rick O'Connell. He's retired and living the high life with his wife and fellow adventurer Evelyn, now played by Maria Bello. That retirement doesn't last very long because their son Alex, Luke Ford, has uncovered the tomb of the ancient and tyrannical Emperor Han, Jet Li. As par for the course, there are those who wish to bring Han back to life so he can reign over the world, and those that would rather see him remain in his current terracotta form. Aiding the O'Connells in the fight to stop Han's rise to power is the ever-faithful Jonathan Carnahan, John Hannah, and an immortal mother-daughter act comprised of Zijuan, Michelle Yeoh, and Lin, Isabella Leong. You can pretty much guess the rest of the Mummy Tomb of the Dragon Emperor from there, so I'm not going to walk through it. What I will say is new director Rob Cohen has thrown the kitchen sink at this production, even when it isn't warranted, in his attempt to brand this movie as his own. The scale of CGI work is probably beyond the scope of the mighty The Lord of the Rings film trilogy. Literally everything. Emperor Han, the undead armies, Yetis, yes, I said Yetis, the car chases, and a great many of the fights are aided by a farm of supercomputers. Even the story and action is ramped up 100-fold over its predecessors. A son to hand off the reins to when Fraser has had enough? Having the Emperor shapeshift just to have an excuse to have a three-headed dragon flying about? Casting Jet Li and Michelle Yeoh just to capitalize on the incredible swirling fighting style immortalized by Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon? These and more are sprinkled about with varying degrees of success. Yet for me, these added bells and whistles take away from the only memorable aspect of the franchise. It was fun and never, ever took itself seriously. No one pretended the movies were the second coming of Indiana Jones. They were meant to entertain in an absurdly ridiculous and cheesy fashion. That ideology was lost here, even though Fraser is still fun to watch in the role. It is clear both he and John Hannah are still holding on to the past, which is some consolation, even though their banter isn't as quick-witted as it once was. Maria Bello does an admirable job filling the shoes of Rachel Weisz while taking the character in a new sophisticated direction. As for Luke Ford, he's got about as much charisma as an overcooked noodle. I can only hope the baton doesn't get passed to him. When it comes to trilogies, pulling off the proverbial hat trick always seems to be an issue for the final installment. There's a laundry list of examples where the third film in a series seems to be weakest, and for a movie as beloved as 1999's The Mummy, as well as its 2001 sequel, it was unable to escape the same fate. Originally celebrated as one of the best horror remakes ever made, the Mummy franchise hit an all-time low when it came back from a 7-year hiatus with 2008's The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor. Gone was the Egyptian setting, as well as any actual mummies, replaced with an entirely new story that maybe could have worked had the stars been aligned. They were sadly nowhere near each other. New continent, new villain. Moving the story from Egypt to China and focusing on a different villain isn't inherently a bad idea. It could have made for an excellent spin-off, or even an anthology series of sorts, where Rick and Evie O'Connell travel the world fighting different supernatural threats. However, given that the second film was a direct sequel that brought back Imhotep, It made this third film seem all the more out of place. Not to mention that China didn't actually have mummies, although we can forgive the title as it was likely done more so in the name of brand recognition. And that's just it. Everything about this movie feels new, and on paper, it all should have worked. You have Jet Li as the villainous undead emperor, but a lot of the movie's tone gets lost when it can't decide if it wants to be a martial arts film or the swashbuckling adventure the first two Mummy movies were. It also feels like it never really makes use of its setting. It was shot on location in China for 5 months, which is why Rachel Weisz didn't return. A lot more on that later. But you never really get the same feel for the setting or culture in the same way the first movie did for Egypt. It's set in 1946, right in the middle of the Civil War that would eventually lead to China going communist in 1949, but it never so much as mentions any of this. Missing heart and soul. The Evie fant in the room is of course the fact that the character of Evie was recast for this third installment. Now, actors have been recast in sequels in a variety of different cases. It's usually at best unnoticeable, and at worst awkward. However, it's not hyperbole to say that this was probably one of the worst cases of recasting in cinematic history. Nothing against Mario Bello. She's an incredibly talented actress, especially in movies like Secret Window and A History of Violence. She does the absolute best she can with what she's given. Her accent is pretty good, and there's even a meta joke thrown in where she says the Evie from her books, based on the first two movies, is a completely different person. But we never buy for a second that this is the same character. And such a large part of why the first two films were so beloved was the immense chemistry between Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz. They played off of each other so well, whether hating or loving each other, you just ate up every moment they were on screen together, and they were so much fun to watch. Again, nothing against Maria Bello, but that chemistry just isn't there. She's trying too hard to convince us that she's Evie, that she never has time to really connect with Fraser. And she's not the only actor that was recast. Rick and Evie's son, Alex, certainly fit the trope of the precocious and annoying child, but he felt like the perfect blending of the two of them. He had his mother's intellect and his father's boldness, and given the 13-year time jump in universe, but only 7-year gap in real life, it made sense that the actor had to be recast, so the age made sense. But again, it's just another actor trying to convince you that he's the same character as before. Plus, his accent goes from British in The Mummy Returns to American in Mummy Tomb of the Dragon Emperor without any explanation, as if we wouldn't notice. Top that with Oded Fehr not returning as Ardith Bey, and it just feels like everything we loved about the first two movies is gone. Brendan Fraser and John Hannah return as, respectively, dashing hero Rick O'Connell and his comic relief sidekick, Jonathan Carnahan. And while that's the lone connection to the earlier films, there aren't even any mummies here. The baddies are an Asian emperor and his army, cast in stone for 2,000 years. And while the characters refer to them as mummies, I'm not so sure that's accurate. This is virtually the same movie. As a display of mindless effects and action scenes, you get what you pay for. Anyone eager to see The Mummy 3, after having 7 years to contemplate The Mummy Returns, shouldn't be disappointed. A numbing 10-minute prologue, complete with non-stop voiceover narration, sets up the needlessly complex backstory to this otherwise simplistic film. In 50 BC, China, sorceress Zi-Wan, Michelle Yeoh, entombs ruthless Emperor Han, Jet Li, and his massive army in stone before he gains the power to take over the world and doom mankind. 2,000 years later, in 1946, Shanghai, college dropout Alex O'Connell, Luke Ford, unearths the Dragon Emperor only to be double-crossed by a Chinese general who wants to resurrect him and, take over the world and doom mankind. Meanwhile, Alex's parents Rick, Brendan Fraser, and Evelyn, Maria Bello, eager for some adventure after years of retirement, have conveniently brought to Shanghai the mystical stone that can resurrect Emperor Han and lead him to Shangri-La, where he will gain immortality and shape-shifting powers. Oh, and Lin, Isabella Leong, who has protected the tomb for the past millennia, joins our heroes as they attempt to fend off the Dragon Emperor. You can probably guess what happens next. The Dragon Emperor is resurrected, leading a chase through Shanghai streets on Chinese New Year, complete with a fireworks gunplay and Rick ending up on a headless horse. We then travel to the Himalayas as our heroes take on the Chinese army and the Dragon Emperor with the aid of some benevolent Yetis, while Han discovers the path to Shangri-La, gains immortality, transforms into a three-headed dragon, and kidnaps Lin. Then back to the Emperor's tomb, where he resurrects his vast army of stone warriors to do battle against a vast army of undead skeleton warriors, both of whom crumble into a pile of sand upon contact, with our heroes caught in between. Or, in fewer words, a bunch of mindless CGI effects propel the film to its inevitable conclusion. Cohen has effectively replaced Sommers in the director's chair, and while this film is certainly missing the atmosphere of the earlier ones, it does feel like a more accomplished package overall. While the movie is all eye candy, it is watchable. Action scenes are well executed and mildly compelling, though you might expect some martial arts in a film partially sold by Jet Li and Michelle Yeoh. You'd be wrong, except for a climatic sword fight between the two and a hand-to-hand fight between Lee and Fraser, both of which are atrociously choreographed and edited. Cast fails to make much of an impression, with Fraser's Rick O'Connell perhaps the weakest leading man ever to headline a blockbuster trilogy. Bello, replacing Rachel Weisz, feels embarrassed with her overdone British accent, though she still lights up the screen, just a little, whenever she's around. Ford is entirely bland, and his romance with Yeoh is completely unconvincing, though he does seem to have some chemistry with Bello, who's playing his mother. Hannah fares best, providing familiar groan-inducing comic relief. Lee and Yeoh are the most accomplished actors here, yet they're hardly in the film, the filmmakers making no use of their natural talents when they are. The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, passes by quickly enough and provides some harmless fun, though it's entirely meaningless and instantly forgettable. I'm glad I'm writing this review hours after seeing the film, as most of it has already slipped away. This universal release enters a marketplace still dominated by The Dark Knight, although its kid-friendly tone may help the film find some commercial breathing room. Still, it'll take some serious repeat business to match The Mummy's $155 domestic haul, let alone The Mummy Returns' $202 take. Foreign audiences have boosted the earlier two films to larger grosses in international markets, and the inclusion of co-stars Jet Li and Michelle Yeoh seems calculated to maximize overseas business, especially in Asia, where the film is set. The series' brand familiarity will keep this tomb lively, especially in ancillaries, but not stellar. In 1940s Shanghai, married adventurers Rick, Brendan Fraser, and Evelyn, Maria Bello, filling in for Rachel Weisz, come out of retirement to help their explorer son Alex, Luke Ford, who has unwittingly resurrected an ancient Chinese emperor, Jet Li, intent on continuing his reign of terror. Though a continuation of the action from The Mummy and The Mummy Returns, even going to the trouble of bringing back several supporting characters, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor can't help but feel removed from the franchise's previous editions. Beyond hiring Cohen as director, and the writing team of Alfred Gough and Millar to pen the screenplay, this new film's most visible shakeup is Weisz's departure as Fraser's love interest Evelyn. While Bello is a fine actress, she simply lacks the old-fashioned movie star radiance that helped make The Mummy's gee-whiz romantic subplot such corny fun. That's not the only problem with the relationship, though. The potentially intriguing conceit of positioning Rick and Evelyn as a bored married couple longing for the bygone exhilaration of their life-threatening mummy adventures quickly turns into a standard, dysfunctional family melodrama as they try to defeat the Emperor while reconnecting with their distant son. Hoping to find a substitute for Rick and Evelyn's flirty, contentious banter from The Mummy, Cohen and his writers pair Alex with a lovely Asian assassin, Isabella Yeoh, but neither their dialogue nor their limp chemistry can compensate. While The Mummy was mostly a competent repurposing of the Indiana Jones film's swashbuckling action and old horror movies' shriek-worthy scares, its chief selling points were Sommers' playful acknowledgement of his plundered sources and the cheerful enthusiasm of his two leads. But with Weisz gone and Fraser pushed into more of an anonymous hero role, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor's emotional core is as lifeless as the scores of perfunctory CG effects dispensed throughout the film without much sense of wonder. Cohen's direction plays up the busyness of the action set pieces, incorporating wirework, slow motion, and unfunny one-liners in such uninspired ways that the sequences labor to generate excitement. As a villain, Jet Li has minimal impact, since his character spends much of the movie as a decomposing statue trying to discover the path to immortality. And when he is in human form, Li's placid features too easily give off the impression of boredom, which seems to tally with what's going on around him. The Mummy Tomb of the Dragon Emperor for mobile phones. Box office. The film premiered in Moscow on July 24, 2008, and had a wide release. Of 3,760 theaters in North America on August 1, 2008, the film was the top-grossing film the day it opened, earning $15.2 million. The Dark Knight was in second place with $12 million on Friday. However, the film did not become number one overall in the box office on opening weekend, claiming only $4.4 million, which allowed The Dark Knight to claim the top spot for the third consecutive week with $42.6 million. The film, however, scored a bigger success at the international box office, where it opened at the first position in 26 of the 28 released markets over the weekend and grossed over $59.5 million in the three-day period. It substantially outpaced comparable openings for The Mummy $16.7 million, and The Mummy Returns $21.5 million in the same markets. The film also set opening records for the distributor in Korea, drawing $13.3 million, Russia $12.7 million, Spain $6.7 million, and Thailand. As of October 10, 2008, the film's domestic total stands at 3,068,449. This brings its worldwide total to 45 million, 70.225. It is the lowest-grossing film in the Mummy trilogy. Critical response. As of June 2022, on Rotten Tomatoes, the film has an approval rating of 133% based on 176 reviews with an average rating of 3.7. SL10, the site's critical consensus, read with middling CG effects and a distinct lack of fun. The Mummy Tomb of the Dragon Emperor finds the series cast its prime as of November 2021 on Metacritic. The film has a weighted average score of 31 out of 100 based on reviews from 33 critics, indicating generally unfavorable reviews. Audiences pulled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of B- on an A+ to F scale. Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times gave the film a positive review, awarding it 3 stars out of 4, and remarking, "Now why did I like this movie? It was just plain dumb fun," is why Ebert also stated that it is the best in the series. Nathan Raven of The Onion's AV Club stated that the film succeeds largely through sheer excess, albeit within a context that plots along mechanically through its first hour. William Arnold of Seattle Post-Intelligencer gave a mildly positive review, saying that anyone in the market for an overblown and totally mindless adventure comedy will certainly get his money's worth. Dallas movie reviewer Casey Cy Corpier said that the film was almost as enjoyable as the original, and liked the fact that it delivered what it now advertised. Kenneth Tarron of the Los Angeles Times said the film has some good things, but does not have enough of them to make the third time the charm. Ken Fox of TV Guide called the film passable popcorn. Fair Jenny Punter of The Globe and Mail said the film is kind of fun, but the twists and turns are all too familiar. Michael Strago of the Baltimore Sun said the film is like an Indiana Jones movie without rhythm, wit, or personality, just a desperate, headlong pace. Home media. The film was released on DVD and Blu-ray on December 16, 2008 by Mids 2011, excluding Blu-ray sales and DVD rentals. It had sold over 2.5 million copies, totaling 41,768.9 in revenue. Future after the film was released, actress Maria Bell stated that another Mummy film will absolutely be made, and that she had already signed on. Actor Luke Ford was signed on for 3 more films as well. However, in 2012, Universal Pictures canceled the film and was instead working on a reboot titled The Mummy on October 12, 2022. Brendan Fraser revealed that he's open to revisit the franchise and said, "I don't know how it would work, but I'd be open to it if someone came up with the right concept later." Free told Pete Hammond that, although he does not know any details about a reboot, he was not against returning on May 11th, 2024. Stephen Sommers told The Hollywood Reporter that a new installment would have to be something would work with all of those actors again on April 4th, 2012. Universal announced their plans to reboot the franchise. The film was intended to be the first installment of the Dark Universe, simply titled The Mummy, and was released in June 2017. However, the film failed both critically and financially, making this the only film installment in a failed Dark Universe. The Mummy Tomb of the Dragon Emperor movie review. Moviegoers who knowingly buy a ticket for The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor are going to get exactly what they expect. There is a mummy, a tomb, a dragon, and an emperor, and the movie about them is all that it could be. If you think The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor sounds like a waste of time, don't waste yours. I, as it happens, have time to waste and cannot do better than to quote from my review of The Mummy 1999. There is hardly a thing I can say in its favor, except that I was cheered by nearly every minute of it. I cannot argue for the script, the direction, the acting, or even The Mummy, but I can say that I was not bored, and sometimes I was unreasonably pleased. There is a little immaturity stuck away in the crannies of even the most judicious of us, and we should treasure it. I was not, however, pleased by The Mummy Returns 2001, although it inspired one of my funnier reviews. But The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor is the best in the series, and from the looks of it, the most expensive. And once again, it presents the spectacle of undead warriors who are awakened from the slumber of ages, only to be defeated in battle, this time by the skeletons of the slaves buried beneath the Great Wall after constructing it, which is a neat trick. Rick O'Connell and his wife Evelyn, Brendan Fraser, and Maria Bello are back, having come out of retirement, to race to the aid of their adult son, Alex Luke Ford, who has inadvertently awakened the mummy of the Dragon Emperor. Gently, in a prologue, we learn he was cursed by the sorceress Xuan Michello, who incurred his wrath by spurning his love. And later we learn, bearing the daughter of General Ming Russell Wong. Both daughter and mother are immortal. So is the emperor. Although it is a mixed blessing when you are immortal, but mummified inside a thick cocoon of terracotta. Where's the benefit? Now the emperor has awakened and unleashes his army of 10,000 slumbering warriors to feed his ambition to conquer the world, which is going to take more than 10,000 spear carriers. But he's operating on BC time to counter him. The sleeping slave skeletons are awakened by the sorceress, and are sort of funny. One misplaces his head and screws it back on the battle between these two sides is won by the side with the fewest missing heads before that climactic event. However, Rick, Evelyn, Alex, and Evelyn's supercilious brother Jonathan John Hannah penetrate the underground city of the Mummy, survive a perilous series of booby traps, and in several other ways remind us of Indiana Jones, the obvious inspiration for this series, which has nothing to do with Forrest Carlo's The Mummy. 1932, they even make it into the Himalayas. And could that be the lost city of Shangri-La? The Emperor is a shifter, able to turn himself into a three-headed fire-breathing dragon, which coils, twists, turns, and somehow avoids scorching himself. He speaks in a low bass rumble, just like Imhotep, the mummy, in the two earlier pictures, whose name continues to remind me of an Egyptian house of pancakes, but moving the action from Egypt to China allows a whole new set of images to be brought into play. And the movie ends by winking at us that the next stop will be Peru. Now, why did I like this movie? It was just plain dumb. Fun is why it is absurd and preposterous, and proud of it. The heroes maintain their ability to think of banal cliches even in the most strenuous situations. Brendan Fraser continues to play Rick as if he is taking a ride at the Universal Studios tour, but Maria Bell has real pluck as she uses a handgun against the hordes of terracotta warriors, the sacrifice of the sorceress in relinquishing not only her own immortality, but that of her daughter permits love to bloom. Although, would you really want a bride who was 4,000 years old, even if she was going to die? We never thought we'd say this, but where's Stephen Sommers when you need him? Previous Mummy films, particularly 2001's The Mummy Returns, may have suffered from Sommers' penchant for extraneous characters, overblown action sequences, and decidedly ropey CG, but at least they were fun. They bounced along at a jolly old pace and had in Brendan Fraser's Rick O'Connell have his sing-to-action hero who poked fun at ridiculously overblown machismo while simultaneously slightly indulging. But Sommers is merely a producer on this belated addition to the franchise. Parachuted into his place is Rob Cohen, director of Stealth. And while he tries valiantly to keep things breezy, ultimately, Cohen's Mummy movie is a cold and lifeless husk that could have done. With a big injection of the FW, the Mummy movies have always invited comparison to the indie series, and those comparisons are more apt than ever this summer, especially when the opening reintroduces us to a very different Rick O'Connell. Bored, missing the juice of the hunt like Indy, he's the mythical hero coming to terms with his own mortality. But this thread is dropped just minutes in when Rick and Evie Maria Bello, replacing Rachel Weisz in body but not in spirit, recant their retirement and head to Shanghai, where as luck would have it, their son Alex Luke Ford and Eve's brother Jonathan John Hannah stranded as well. The comic relief to such embarrassing effect that you want to hug the poor sad are currently stationed. And then Lee's Emperor is awakened and all hell breaks loose. Well, tumbles loose might be more. Apartment, there are decent ideas here. A chase through the streets of Shanghai is enjoyably frenetic, and a bad ATT between Hans's terracotta army and thousands of zombie soldiers showcases above-average effects, but too often the pacing is one note and hampered by Cohen's decision to shoot much of the action with a Bourne-style shaky cam for a franchise as determinately old-fashioned as this. It's a jarring choice. As for the big fights, they're a huge disappointment. The much-hyped clash between Lee and Yeoh is blink, cane you, miss it stuff, but most of the film's problems stem from its clunker of a script by Alfred Gough and Miles Millar, riddled with clunky exposition, way for thin characters and plot developments that should be a giddy, pulpy delight, but which instead feel cold and devoid of real inspiration. The appearance of a friendly group of Yetis about halfway through, for example, is a world away from the audacious giggle. It should have been far more disastrous, though, is the decision to shift most of the focus from Fraser onto Ford as Alex, Rick, and Ease chip off the old block son, presumably with one eye on future sequels, notwithstanding the fact that Fraser looks like he could be Ford's older brother. The newcomer is a charisma-free zone who may bring a certain physicality to the role, but can't compete with Fraser's carefree charm. Having said that, Fraser's O'Connell here is a poor facsimile of the cocky chancer who lit up the first Mummy. The wisecracks are tired and infrequent, the heroics forced and routine, and for a series that may be named after its villains, but derived its spirit and drive from its hero, that's in glaring flaw. Other information about this film. The Mummy franchise now really is dead, dead, dead. It is so dead it could win gold at the Dead Olympics, establishing a new British and Commonwealth record in the 400 MD composition event. But it is getting dug up yet again by director Rob Cohen to see if there's any gold still hidden under the bandages. Brendan Fraser's head looks more waxy and cubic than ever, with that oldest Juv lead in the universe look playing legendary adventurer. Rick O'Connell, Maria Bello, has a highly unconvincing British accent, playing his wife Evelyn from her tense, honor the words, "Oh no, we're in danger. Come out as your Nurwer, year Durer." Poor John Hannah, a decent actor who deserves better, is given some awful lines and awful direction, playing their rackety pal Jonathan, running a club in Shanghai. The plot is now that the ancient Chinese emperor, played by action, starred Jet Li, together with all his terracotta army, are going to be released from their spell, and will once again run among spreading naughtiness and wickedness in the world. This movie is just a shiny, sparkly device for making money. It's like watching a slot machine. This is the second time this summer that I've sat down to review a game with Brendan Fraser's mug on the cover. The previous experience was disastrous. Not that this is Brendan Fraser's fault, since he has no control over the quality of these titles, but I think I'm starting to develop a Pavlovian fear of the goofy Canadian actor after suffering through The Mummy Tomb of the Dragon Emperor. My brain is developing a classical condition response. Brendan Fraser's face means pain. Tomb of the Dragon Emperor gives a gloss over retelling of the film's plot and interrupts it with Run and Gun Levels, starring Brendan Fraser and his too old, too brunette, and two American-sounding sun, the cutscenes. Between each level are absurdly minimalist. A single image, generally of some landscape, is all that is displayed on the screen, while a woman tells the plot in a hilariously bad accent. I assume she's attempting to sound at least vaguely Asian, but it comes off like a witch is telling me what happens in The Mummy 3. Speaking of terrible voice work, or both of the main characters in this game have the same 2 lines of in-game speech. The Okano-Fatherson duo don't speak much during the game, only piping up to tell me I'm not playing the game right. If I tried to climb a ledge improperly or decipher a symbol before I was supposed to, the characters chime in with identical inflection. I can't do that now. The thing is, most of the time, he could definitely do that right now. The game is rigid in its progression, to the point of doing absolutely stupid things. At one point, the game would not let me write down a calligraphy symbol because I had bypassed one of the switches that shoots fire across my pathway. I'm terribly sorry that my ability to not be a complete idiot and actually avoid getting engulfed. INF Flame somehow inhibits my ability to read a simple calligraphy symbol for a change of pace. The developers must have known players would do the wrong thing. A lot, the characters will substitute their refusal with a simple acid-tongued no. It's the kind of, a spoiled rotten kid spews when he refuses to obey his parents. It completely changes that. I can't do that now, to an I won't do that. Now, and you can't make me, and you're not even my real dad. I nearly throttled my DS after hours of listening to the uncooperative bickering of the would-be heroes, equally annoying, though decidedly less vocal are the inaccurate controls for shooting. The game is in 3D. With the camera above the characters, players tap the touchscreen to fire in 360 degrees fashion. The angles that I can fire in rarely seem to match up with the angles the enemies were running at me from melee. Combat is easier to use, but is pretty much worthless in any level, except the first. Don't even attempt it on any of left. The boss battles occasionally, some in-game cinematics occur, and those aren't too shabby for a DS title. But overall, the graphics are just kind of ham. Enemies come in 2 different flavors, made of clay and made of human. They don't intersperse often, so I either fought a bunch of terracotta guys or a bunch of normal guys. More detail, I'm a big fan of 1999's The Mummy, and a fan of 2001's The Mummy Returns. This spars repeating because it's vital to understanding how deep my disappointment is with The Mummy Tomb of the Dragon. Emperor the Third, and now I hope final installment in the franchise. I wasn't expecting a lot from this one. Not with the departure of creator, writer, and director Stephen Sommers, and not with the departure of Rachel Weisz, though this was of slightly less concern, and I was expecting to have to justify and rationalize how entertainingly goofy I was expecting to find it. I fully anticipated recognizing that I would be overly generous in my estimation of it and not caring, but even with bar set low and my unconditional love set high, I cannot freaking believe how Crewy Tomb rips out my geeky little heart and blood, stomps on it. All the magic, all the life has been surgically excised from this charmless exercise in overblown action. The 1999 film Sommers gave us a wonderfully cheeky, smartly snarky send-up of action comedies that was also itself a wildly fun example of the genre. The best parodies always manage to be excellent examples of what they're making fun of. But you can't even point to Tom as the kind of thing that Sommers was toying with, because this new flick utterly fails to realize it's riddled with cliches, and hence again, even worse. Also fails to understand that cliches do actually serve storytelling purposes in need. Other words, if you're going to steal, do something with your ill-gotten gains. Don't just stand there gawping at your stolen treasure. And so as Tomb opens, setting the stage in ancient China with an evil emperor, Jetli the Forbidden Kingdom War, who desires immortality so that he can conquer the whole world. We have Michelle, Yeoh's Memoirs of Asia Crouching Tiger Hidden Dragon, which informing us in voiceover that we're about to see a mythic battle between good and evil in pretty much those very words, and with no hint that anyone involved, director Rob Cohen, screenwriters Alfred, Gough, and Miles, Millar appreciates that unless this kind of thing is offered with a soupin of snappy irony, all it does is make us roll our eyes and supply our own snark, perhaps in the form of a a think, or a well. The mummy winked at this kind of thing. Tomb doesn't even know that it's something to be winked at. That attitude should have been stolen from the earlier films, but it was left on the vault floor in favor of ripping off simple plot points, which only emphasizes the lack of imagination at play here. The Emperor gets pissed off because his General Russell Wong Twisted dares to steal the witch from him after the Emperor had decreed that no man but him would touch her, just like all the stuff with him. Hotep and the Pharaoh's concubine that got the plot rolling in 1999. The witch cursed the Emperor, and he and his army turn into those famous terracotta statues you've seen pictures of and are buried for all eternity, or at least until the O'Connell can dig him up. I would have thought that Gough and Millar, the guys who wrote Spider-Man 2 and Shanghai Noon, the latter of which shares a certain tone with the 1999 film, would have been the perfect team to write a mummy movie, but it turns out not really all they've done is lift parts of the story wholesale from the previous films. And worser again, from the Indiana Jones saga, with one puzzle piece early in the movie here that they found in the Well of the Souls, and one plot twist late in the movie that is a downright embarrassingly direct theft from the Nar. Last Crusade, everything else is forced and awkward, like the relationship between Rick and Evelyn O'Connell, Brendan Fraser, Journey to the Center of the Earth Crash, and Maria Bello, the Jane Austen book club. Thank You for Smoking, who cannot alas adequately stand in for Wise and their son Alex Luke Ford. Though this could perhaps be blamed on the fact that the poor kid has aged 20 years since the last film. He's supposed to be 19, and looks and acts 30. Small comfort can be found. Then I suppose in the fact that we cannot hear half the dialogue over the racket of the incoherent action sequences, which is a bit of a surprise, since Cohen has previously given us movies that are, while stupid, at least entertainingly stupid, such as Stealth and The Fast and the Furious. Perhaps the director realized how unentertaining stupid the Tomb script was and chose to try to bury it under video game CGI, replacing the beautiful painterly CGI of, like, the earlier films. He doesn't quite succeed in that attempt, but that's probably his smallest crime here. The Mummy Tomb of the Dragon Emperor takes place around 20 years after the last film, in a 2-hour special effect extravaganza filled with mummy battles, yeti, and lots of violence, but little in the way of character development. In fact, we are teased into believing that a romance is going to develop between Alex, O'Connell female heroine Lynn, but the film then ends with this storyline, apparently dropped or forgotten. The film does return most of the original cast except for Rachel Wise, who was absent due to pregnancy. She is replaced by Maria Bello, an American actress. The film does have a little of the humor of the first film, but only a little. Like Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull, it introduces a son into the picture as the next generation of archaeologists, adventurers, but his character is never fully developed. So much of the chemistry from the first 2 films is gone, morally. The Tomb of the Dragon Emperor once again pushed the PG-13 rating in terms of violence, but one reason it can retain the rating is because of the fantasy nature of the violence. For example, the Dragon Emperor appears to start bleeding, but upon closer inspection, it is mud rather than blood he is transformed into. A clay statue. This takes place with many soldiers, and it's rather gruesome as is. The scene where one character explodes once again, it is molten lava, rather than BL blood that we see, so this somehow makes it more acceptable for a PG-13 rating. Of course, there is plenty of realistic violence as well, from Rick O'Kell accidentally sticking a fly casting in his neck, to a scene where a man is about to be torn limb from limb. The camera cuts away add to this. The decapitation and death of hundreds of animated mummies, and it is clear that this is not for young children, sexually. There is a brief sex scene early in the film, but no nudity. We also see Rick O'Connell apply cold ice to his crotch. After a fight, there are a few bad words, and in one instant, one of the characters shouts, "There is no call for bad language." But this does not stop him. I did not hear any F or S words. However, in one case, the mummy is told to burn in hell, which we presume he literally will do, for the Bible does not support the occultic legends espoused in this film. The occult is obviously present, as in the other films. It is played out in adventure form and not taken seriously. But children need to understand that it is appointed for men to die once, and dalling. Then comes judgment. Hebrews 9:27, there are no immortal mummies or undead, creatures awaiting magic powers to resurrect them. Only Christ can resurrect the dead, and the wicked will rise only to destruction and judgment. John 5:29, the story seems intriguing. The Dragon Emperor and his terracotta army are raised to conquer the world. If the Dragon Emperor reaches Shangri-La, he will become immortal. If the army pass the Great Wall of China, they too will become immortal. Our heroes must stop them. That is basically it. The story never really develops. Beyond this movie obviously made some changes from the first two films. For one thing, Rob Cohen replaces Stephen Sommers. A quick look at Cohen's resume, however, shows only one memorable film, Dragonheart. And this film is nothing like that one. Perhaps that's the fault of the script. It has a growth, promising idea, but nothing seems to go anywhere in one scene. Alex O'Connell comments on his father's plan, saying, that seems a little short on details, unfortunately. So was the script fans of special effects. Laden action films will probably enjoy this one, but if you are expecting something like the first Mummy movie, then you best wait for home video. Overall, the movie is average. It seems to be missing the magic of the last two Mummy movies, as the chemistry that is seen in the earlier Mummy movies is present. This could be due to not only the female lead, Maria Bello, replaced Rachel Weisz, but also that too many years have gone by in the lives of the major characters. There are many holes during the 20 movie years since the last Mummy movie. In many ways, it asks more questions than answers, and one is left with the impression that it tries to cover more time and territory than was really impossible to cover in the movie. Offensive language is left to a minimum, and there are several suggestive scenes within the movie. Several are what one would normally be seen between a married couple, but whether they add anything to the movie is debatable, unless for more character development in one scene, where Mario's character is feeling a bit romantic. She finds Brendan asleep in the chair when the movie does finally pick up. The action is non-stop. The scenes of the Mummy army are good, and I was left wondering if this was a recreation of how armies fought during this time. Scenes where blood was actually shown was very limited, and in many cases where one would expect to see mud was shown when Jet Li's character turned to clay was fairly intense, so was when Jet Li's character was finally defeated. These were probably the most intense scenes of the movie. Biblically, there was little to say about this movie. It did show, as all the Mummy movies show past and present, a strong anti-biblical viewpoint as Christians. We know that the only resurrection that will happen is when Christ returns to earth. Then Christians will be resurrected from the dead, not to wonder and torment the humans on earth, but instead to the glorious presence of God. The second resurrection is one that none of us want to be at, when God brings all to life again, and then those people will, due to their own actions, be sent to hell also. There were several scenes where magic and spiritism is prevalent, with pagan worship and cultic practices. Caution is advised here, especially with a very young, as they hold all that is seen and heard, and the interest in satanic magic can come back to plague years down the road. We all know as Christians that such practices are satanic. Matter of fact, one of the early commands from God was to not suffer a witch to live. God knew that the attraction of such things would eventually contaminate the Jewish nation and would also contaminate Christians. However, having said that there is a lot of Chinese history in this movie about the first Chinese emperor. For those who like history or archaeology, the movie has a lot of fascinating and historically accurate information about the early days of Chinese history. The terracotta soldiers do exist. The first emperor was a major player in China. He did consolidate China into a single country. This emperor was fascinated in immortality and was very paranoid. Historically, there are several fallacies within the movie, but with all movies it is meant to entertain and not be used as historical fact. However, as Christians, we need to be aware that almost all movies we see are from worldly people who have no desire or wish to look at things in a biblical viewpoint. We need to be wise as serpents, but also, as parents, to shield our young ones from all appearances of evil negative. This movie was, if you're just looking to waste a few more hours of your life and distract yourself from work and your inevitable death, this movie will do it. If you want something with a decent plot and casting, this is not it. The first Mummy movie was really good. The second was decent and fun. This one fell flat. What's wrong with this one? The acting feels weak. The plot is much more incoherent and much lamer than the others. The other movies were good because of halfway decent action with good acting and a good script. This movie has lame acting, bad casting, bad plot, and none of the awesome wit and humor, and Rachel Weisz is gone. She's replaced by some other actress who doesn't do 1/10 of the good job Rachel did. Evie, played by Rachel, was a wonderful, funny, sweet, adorable, and lovable character in Ray. The other movies in this one, the new actress just couldn't do it. Epic fail. As we say now, this is third or fourth and a half. Go round the scorpion. King fits in after The Mummy and The Mummy Returns, but before Revenge of the Mummy. A short made especially for Universal theme parks with mumming rides, with the franchise that began with Stephen Sommers' 1999 reinvention of Universal's Dusty endearing Boris in Bandages picture from 1932. You can tell the deep commitment the present filmmakers have to their cinematic history, from the quote by producer Sean Daniel in the press notes about going to every Boris Karloff version of The Mummy. There was only one Tom Tyler, then Lon Chaney Jr., took over the monster makeup. Chaney, 3 times Sommers, who went from trashing The Mummy to scuppering the rest of Universal's monster franchises in Van Helsing, has stepped down to producer status, and Rob Cohen, The Fast and the Furious, takes over as director, which perhaps explains why this Chinese mummy turns for a spell into a jitter, like flying reptile trivia. Detail: this is the third Cohen movie with dragon in the title, scripted by Alfred Gough and Miles Millar, who have done good work on Smallville. Tomb of the Dragon Emperor brings back a clutch of characters and most of the actors from the first 2 Mummy films, and keeps having them say things like, "I hate mummies," just to remind you we are in the same business, even though Egypt has been left behind, aside from a tacky Shanghai nightclub called Moti, and we're in China. A more significant line comes from John Hannah, returning as the agonizingly annoying comedy relief coward who whined "My ass is on fire, my ass is on fire," has his trousers catch light while he's on a truck full of fireworks, careening, though, the streets of Shanghai in pursuit of a just-revived terracotta warrior. Villain repetition doesn't make the line any funnier, and the fact that all the dire peril is a cheap joke goes a long way towards explaining why this action-packed everything, but the kitchen sink special effect spectacle is in the end faintly dull. The outline owes something to The Mummy Returns, as a prologue establishes the otherwise nameless Dragon Emperor Jet Li as a major bad who built the Great Wall of China on top of his enemy corpses, and got sorceress Ziwan Michelle Yeoh to unlock magic secrets, which might make him immortal, only to double-cross her by having his top general Russell Wong, her boyfriend, ripped apart by horses. In Revenge, Zwan turns the D and his whole army into terracotta as usual. The curse has complicated rules, which mean he's bound to be resurrected eventually. So her daughter Lin Isabella Leong has to spend 2,000 years guarding the tomb and toying around the one weapon which can permanently kill him, a magic dagger. Hey, why not stab him with the dagger before turning him to terracotta? Come to that, why is the Honorable General so devoted to such a complete bastard? And why does Zwan go to the bother of making him immortal rather than turning him into a toad? Also in the setup is an unrate mix of James Hilton and H. Rider Haggard as a cap. Trip to Shangri-La in the Himalayas, guarded by 3 Yeti, and a dip in a magic pool confer proper non-R noir immortality on the villain, plus the ability to transform into any monster shape he can think of. He manages about 2 and a gambit whereby the revived terracotta army will become unkillable, fight unbreakable if they cross the Great Wall, which is guarded by the skeleton armies of those long-dead anti-D martyrs commanded by one-armed General Ming, who ought to have no arms and legs if he'd been properly quartered. This feels more like some sort of role-playing game, whereby contestants have to pick up points that confer extra powers than an actual plot. But it probably isn't anyone's fault that what passes for a story seems cobbled out of other sequels released this summer, as we get the friction between an older adventurer returning star, Brendan Fraser, and his cocky young son, Luke Fort, straight out of Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, a last real Reveal that mummies have been found in Peru either refers to the Lucas Spielberg film or means that any fourth installment is now going to have to think of another local and business with a to-be-resurrected world-conquering magic army out of Hellboy 2. The Golden Army. Fraser enjoys himself less here than in Journey to the Center of the Earth 3D, and really isn't suited to playing grouchy dad in the tiresome scenes about how he was never there for his son, but really truly icky. Loves him enough to take a sword through the heart. He gets better for him, while Bello has one joke to explain why she isn't. Rachel Weisz adopts a reasonable cut glass, British accent, and gets eased out by the fact the big relationship in the film is formulaic father-son nonsense out of the script by numbers. Book the subtext for this always seems to be looked at I'm a big shot in Hollywood. Now don't you wish you'd played catch with me more often so I wouldn't be in therapy? The contemporary villains are a Chinese general Anthony Wong Chow Sang whose scarred sidekick Jesse Ming comes on a bit like Cate Blanchett in Indiana Jones. The script doesn't definitely say so, but this would be restorer of the Chinese Empire. Circa 1947 seems to be more a nationalist than a communist, though I suspect access to all the spectacle of Chinese landscape would have been curtailed if it were specified either way, like the other mummy films. It's too crowded with business. Naturally, everyone does kung fu to bother with anything like magic, romance, suspense, excitement, or mystery. It's a film in which fabled lost city are found within 30 seconds screen time of their being mentioned, and vast distances are covered without so much as an animated map or a montage of tramping feet. This film, directed by Rob Cohen, written by Alfred Gough, Miles Millar, produced by Stephen Sommers, Sean, Daniel Bob Ducsay, Tim starring Brendan Fraser, Jet Li Maria Bello, John Hannah, Michello Russell Wong, Liam Cunningham for Isabella Leong, cinematography Simon, Dujin, edited by Joel Negan, Kelly Matsumoto, music by Randy Edelman. Production companies, Universal Pictures, Relativity Media, The Sommers Company, Alphaville Films distributed by Universal Pictures, release states July 24th, 2008 in Moscow, August 1st, 2008 in United States, running time 112 minutes. Country United States, language English, budget $145 million, box office $45.8 million. So guys, this is the review of The Mummy Tomb of the Dragon Emperor movie and some information about it. How do you like our today's video? Please let us know by commenting, and if you like this video, please like it, share it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.